I'm the only speaker between you and lunch, so I'll try and make sure I'm building up enough hunger for you to get into the lunch session. And at the same time, thank you so much for taking the time to attend the session. I realize there's a conflict. There's another HTML5 session happening at the same time in the main hall. I have had the chance to look through the contents of that, and I think you'll probably end up, getting to know enough and more about HTML5 across both these sessions, so you're not going to miss anything particularly. Let me just switch on the projector. So my name is Harish Vaidyanathan. I'm on Twitter as Harish V is my handle, and that's also my mail ID at microsoft.com. As I was introduced, I run technical evangelism for Microsoft. Before I get into the session, just a quick show of hands. What's your primary browser? Chrome. Is your primary browser Chrome? Is your primary browser Firefox? Is your primary browser Internet Explorer 8? Okay, that helps. Who's downloaded Internet Explorer 9? A few of you. Good. What I'm basically going to talk to you about in the session is, before I dive into a quick primer of of HTML5 and show you a bunch of demos and how they're actually making HTML5 real, I want to set a little bit of context. If you're like me, when you start learning about HTML5, you realize everybody's trying to say, hey, I am making HTML5 bigger. Microsoft's trying to make a lot of noise about HTML5. So is Apple with Safari. So is Google with Chrome and Mozilla with Firefox. Everybody's trying to do a lot of stuff with HTML5. What I'm trying to go over in the first part of the presentation is just give you a quick overview of what the standards process is like. What does it take for something to become a standard? And hopefully you'll have your own share of laughter as we go through the the first 10 minutes. And then I'm going to deep dive into specific features of HTML5. I've written a bunch of code which I want to definitely walk you through and just showcase just the sheer amount of power that HTML5 brings to your hands. And again, development is not my full-time job. Like I said, I lead technical evangelism. So I don't do a lot of code, but most of the stuff that I'm showing you, all except one, is actually handwritten. I actually wrote all of this code. And that should give you a fair idea. If this director can sit and write code, you can obviously, as a developer, write much better code. So at the end of this, you should hopefully walk away with a real sense of what HTML5 enables today and just what the journey is going to be before you can get to one markup for all browsers, right? And that's obviously important. So let's dive in. So how many of you know this? Have seen this picture before? Okay, 4 or 5 of you. So what is this picture? It's the logo for HTML5, right? Well, almost. So this was announced on the 18th of January, and the date is a little important. So W3C says, HTML5 is so big that it's got to have a logo. And on the 19th of January, one of the sub-working groups, which is called the WHAT-WG, the Web Hypertext Applications Technology Working Group, which has Apple and Mozilla and a bunch of others as Opera as participants, they basically came in on the 19th of January and they said, hey, HTML has never had versions. HTML 3.2 was there, 4 was there, but we never said HTML4. We simply said HTML, right? So now it's HTML5. Why do we create a logo for this? So these guys couldn't even agree on the fact that HTML5 should be called HTML5 and therefore it needs a logo, right? So that's kind of the fun part. A more sarcastic way of looking at it is if you put IBM, Apple, Google, Microsoft, and a bunch of other Opera and a bunch of these guys, you can't even agree on a logo. Forget about the specifications, right? That's kind of how hotly contested this whole standard. Simple example of just how complicated the standards process is. So let's continue through this. So is that the standard? I can't say, right? So what is HTML5? Clearly, it's the future of the web. It's going to enable a whole new class of applications to be created, which has not been possible earlier. You would have to depend on a lot of native plugins, such as Silverlight, Flash, and the others, to build some of these experiences. Not all of them, to be extremely clear. But at the same time, this is a body of spec that's under development. Anybody wants to guess when HTML5 standardization process started? Just an year would suffice. Pick an year. 2004, go one back. 2003. That's when parts of HTML5, the Web Hypertext Applications group that I just talked about, the guys who are working on IndexedDB, the guys who are working on web sockets, they actually started work in 2003, right? And that point in time, Silverlight didn't even exist. Right? Flash did exist, but from 2003 to 2011, 8 years on, the spec is still not finalized. So it's clearly under development, and it's a very, very large body of work. It's not at a point where you can say, do you support HTML5? You can't get a yes-no answer. That's the reality because the spec itself is being evolved. And that's a very important point for you to note if you actually write code. And I'll explain to you, a little bit more about this. It is not a marketing message, and it does not stand for how to meet the ladies, to be very, very clear. So, what is HTML5? Now, this is another, hopefully, one of those revelation moments when you figure out just how big this spec is. So, there are two standards body. There is the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, which owns most of the spec. Then there is ECMA, which owns the following spec. Anybody wants to guess? JavaScript. So, ECMA owns the JavaScript specification. Now, inside W3C, there are separate, working groups. So, there is some working group which is focused just on HTML. Which is what you write. What tags do you use? Can you use the font tag? Can you use the frame set tag? Can you use the P tag, the HTML tag, the input type equal to email, input type equal to color, all these new tags. Those are all part of HTML. And that's obviously not the biggest spec, as you can probably imagine. The biggest body of work in HTML5 is this body of work called CSS. And then you have this other working group called Web Apps, which is where a whole bunch of new, innovative, cool things are happening. The Web Hypertext Application Working Group is owning the Web Apps specification. Apart from that, we have SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics. I'll show you that quickly. There's a small, separate standards body focused on geolocation. And then you have the standards body that's focused on ECMA Script 262, also known as JavaScript. So what's inside each one of them? That's what is inside each one of them. Now, if you were to sit and count, it's about 101. I actually did this. There are about 101 different elements of inside each one of these bodies of standards. So question number one, what is HTML5? Well, that is HTML5, one person could say. Another person could say, no, HTML5 is just this one, just the first one where you actually write the HTML, which is the new generation of HTML5. That's what HTML5 is. So there is no clear definition of what HTML5 is and is not. So the next time somebody says, hey, my browser supports HTML5, or somebody says, hey, do you know HTML5? You should probably ask them a question saying, so what do you mean? Do you mean all of this, or do you mean just the first box? Right? This is a very, very important thing for you to realize. And if I were to quickly zoom in and show you some of these. So inside HTML, the body of spec, which has all the tags and so on, there is the HTML5, the first one. This is where all the new tags are showing up. The input type equal to color, input type equal to range, input type equal to email, input type equal to telephone. All of those things are inside this. There's more. There is a Canvas 2D context, one of my favorite features of HTML5, and I mean the first box HTML5. I'll show you that. There's more. There's microdata. There is HTML5 markup. There is polyglot markup. There's a bunch of things. And then there is CSS. I don't even have to get started. You can just keep going on and on and on. For those of you who sat through the previous session, CSS media queries is just one element. And I'm sure Harish Shivanamakrishnan might have mentioned to you just how big media queries alone is. Right? I don't know if he could cover everything, but that's 1 hour just to talk to you about where media queries is today. And then there are so many more. So HTML5 in its grand avatar is this. This is what all is included in this. But we haven't answered another question. What is the standards process? How do these things become standard? Well, there's a fairly simple, straightforward workflow. And all of us are open to participate in this. You just have to go sign up to a mailing list on W3C.org, and you can start participating in this. So let's pick an idea. Let's say we want to contribute to the CSS3 media queries working group. So what happens there? First, somebody puts out a working draft. And somebody has an idea that, hey, it'll be good to be able to create different kinds of CSS to apply to different kinds of media. And let's say that's an idea one of you has. You go and put out a public draft, and then other people in the community start contributing to it. It becomes a working draft. And then it goes through something called as, it gets to a milestone called last call, which means, hey, this is the last call. If any of you have any feedback, please jump in. It goes through that milestone. After it goes through the milestone, it becomes what's called as a candidate recommendation. Now, this is an important milestone because after candidate recommendation milestone, the only way the specification can move forward to being a recommendation is if at least 2 browsers implement it. That's a very tricky situation. So let's say there is CSS transforms, right? That's another one of the standards that are being worked upon. That has to be implemented by at least 2 browsers. So let's say Chrome and IE decide to support it, or Chrome and Firefox, some 2. They have to implement it, and then it has to be widely adopted enough before it moves to a proposed recommendation, and then it finally becomes a recommendation. That's the stage, right? Now, the trick is to be able, for a developer at least, is to be able to use a standard when it is a candidate recommendation and being able to migrate off the standard to when it becomes a recommendation. Let me give you some quick examples. How many of you here actually do CSS code, or not CSS code, CSS markup? That's far few. What do the rest of you do? You do other, HTML code targeting browsers? Okay, let me take a step back. How many of you enjoy coding for multiple browsers? Do you actually enjoy coding for multiple browsers? How many of you enjoy coding for one browser and making sure it works across all? Well, pretty much all of us would, right? That's the ideal state. Today, when you look at, let's say, any markup, let's say border radius, if you want to apply it for a WebKit browser, you would say hyphen WebKit, hyphen border radius, da 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 da. If you want to apply it for a Microsoft browser, you could say hyphen MS, hyphen border radius, da 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 da. If you want to do it for Mozilla, you would say hyphen Moz, something. Those are all vendor-specific prefixes. That's what they're called, vendor-specific prefixes. Now, the only way you can use any piece of standard which is in the candidate recommendation stage, when two browsers or more have implemented it, is you have to use vendor-specific tags. When it becomes a standard, you can take off the vendor-specific prefixes, right? So when border radius becomes a standard as per W3C, you don't have to say hyphen Moz, hyphen border radius. You don't have to say hyphen WebKit, hyphen border radius. You can just say border radius. That's the trick. To be able to use a standard when it is a candidate recommendation and be able to easily move off it when it becomes a recommendation, and you can take out all these vendor-specific prefixes. That's the whole name of the game. So let's take the first box, the HTML5 box, which has all the markup, all the semantics that are required to lay out a document. Where is that particular standard? Well, you'll be pleased to hear that that particular standard specification is about 1200 pages long. If you were to just read through it, or you were trying to print it, it's about 1200 odd pages. I haven't printed it, so I can't be precise about the number, but that's how large, how massive that is. That's headed by, in fact, that's the screenshot. You'll probably notice there's somebody called Ian Hickson from Google who essentially heads the HTML5 committee. Now, a lot of people misunderstand. So Google represents all of HTML5? No, they have chairman responsibility for the HTML5 working group. Not on the others, which are headed by Apple. Some of them are headed by Microsoft, and so on and so forth. But that's how large it is. That's the URL. You will have the presentation uploaded on the website. You can go ahead and take a look at it. But essentially, the page is so long, some browsers can't even load the page. For those of you who realize how most of these HTML documents are rendered, they become a tree structure in memory, right? They become a DOM, and you can walk the DOM. This particular page is so large, your browser memory usage would go up to like 600 megs just to render the whole page. That's how massive the spec is. And this is just the first one. I haven't even talked to you about the rest. So this is work in progress. The screenshot is the most recent one from 5th of April. The previous version was on the, I think, 14th of January or something. This particular spec is still open. And currently, it's in the working draft stage. What does that mean? So in this draft, there is a definition for the new form elements, right? So for example, there's a new form element called input type equal to email, which makes it easy for you to capture email. Some browsers support it, some browsers don't support it. The question is, why should it even be supported? Because it's a working draft. It hasn't even got to candidate recommendation. So if you're building a web page and you're using input type equal to email, it will have odd behavior across browsers because it hasn't gotten to a point where it's a recommendation. It's not even a candidate recommendation, right? And this is one of the stands that Microsoft has taken, saying we will support only those tags which are either already standards or are getting very close to standards. We are not going to support stuff which is completely work in progress. If you come to the main session, I have a keynote session later on in the day. I'm going to show you some of the side effects of using standards that are so early in the stage. They can lead to security issues. They can lead to having to just do a lot of extra dev plugin work, which you don't have to do otherwise. So that's just the HTML5 spec standard. That's in a working draft. So I said, let's do one better. What if we take all the standards that I showed you on the previous slide, the 101 of them, and apply a color code to each one of them to find out what's the status of them, right? Which is what this particular slide does. So if you look at the broad body of specification, JavaScript, standard, done, good to go. So ECMA Script 262, if that's what you're using, it's a standard. All browsers should implement it the same way. Well, the question is should, or the point is should, right? So if you look at ECMA Script 262 and look at how is the standard implementation of that standard across browsers, 99.2 or something. The others are obviously further down, 98 point so on and so forth. I realize you have a question. Can I come back? Thank you. Because I have quite a bit of stuff to cover, but I'll make sure I come back to all the questions. Thanks. So that's just ECMA Script. Look at if you look at geolocation, that thin line there, that's also a standard. So if you're using geolocation, and all these browsers are implementing it the same way, it'll work just fine. But you look at the other things, everything is, so many things are work in progress. So If a browser implements it, and as a developer, if you decide to use it, good luck. Because it may change, the spec may change, the standard may evolve, the browser may. So that's the standards process. If there's only one thing you want to take away from everything I've said so far, just realize that, actually not one, two things. One, HTML5 is big. And if somebody says, I support HTML5, or do you know HTML5, you should always ask a question back, saying, what do you mean by HTML5? Second thing you should realize is many of these things are work in progress. And later on, I have a small, small slide which shows just how much time some of these are going to take, right, to become standards. So let's dive in. Now let's do some actual HTML5 work. I call this a whirlwind trip because I want to go through some of the juicier, meatier aspects of HTML5 before I dive in. So first thing, what's the opening line of your HTML document, .htm page or whatever? What's the opening line? What's the full line? Doc type HTML5, mumble, because nobody ever writes this. Let's face it, I never written this. I use Visual Studio, or I just open the last HTML page, copy paste and put it in. Turns out there are 15 different variants of that line, right? So you can use HTML, or you can use XHTML, you can use strict, you can use transitional, you can use frame set, and there are many more. That's 6 combinations that I've listed there, right? If you use XHTML 1.0 strict, it comes closest to what the HTML5 doc type is. Isn't this much simpler? And if you ever were, trying to be evil and toyed around with that thing, instead of saying W3C.org, if you say harishv.org, it will just ignore it anyway. So it doesn't matter what you really write there. So with HTML5, one of the biggest simplifications that have happened is the doc type is simple, right? You can just say doc type equals doc type HTML. That means it's an HTML document, HTML5 document. And in fact, earlier in the Scott Davis's talk, he was mentioning the fact that Google.com, the homepage, has now moved to doc type HTML. Similarly, the Apple homepage has moved to doc type HTML. In fact, locally in India, we have a lot of websites, I think about 100, 120 of them in India, which have moved the default doc type to HTML, which means they are now moving to HTML5. That's a big thing. And I'm giving you India local relevant example. Time permitting, I'll show you what we've done with Flipkart, what we've done with India Times, NDTV, Snapdeal. These are all people who've implemented HTML5 doc type on their homepage. Some of them have also implemented HTML5. But this is a big change. You think this is good? It's easier. At least we can write this thing. Questions I'll come back to. Okay, please. Simplified. Primarily it's simplified. And what also happens is most of the HTML5 supporting browsers, they all have to have backward compatibility or downgrade modes. When the browser sees this, it automatically goes to HTML5 mode. So in IE particularly, IE9 particularly, if your document starts with this, we will not try to use IE8 mode or IE7 mode. We will not try to walk the HTML and try to guess, have you written IE7 HTML or IE6 HTML or 3.2 HTML? We'll just go with HTML5 HTML. Next thing, the video tag. How many of you have known of the video tag? A few of you, which is good. So before HTML5, if you wanted to show a bit of video on the page, what would you do? Well, you would use Flash, and if you're trying to make me happy, you would probably say Silverlight. But that's basically there is, right? There's no other way to actually play video on the web page. What HTML5 does is introduces this really, really neat tag called video. And all you have to do is just put the video in there, give it a source, and you can actually do some fun stuff. You can actually script the video. And one of my, my favorite demos, again, I wrote this, is actually toying around with the video. You can actually go frame by frame. You can tinker around with the video, which is really neat. You can actually write text on top of the video using JavaScript. So this video is not just, take the video and put it. You can toy around with it quite a bit. The other thing that you have to probably note with the video tag is, remember standards? So everybody agrees that, yes, we should have video tag. Most of the browsers say, we will implement MP4. Google says, no, we will not implement MP4 because H.264, which is the container for the codec, has some legal licensing patent issues. So Chrome has basically decided to go ahead and support a different format called WebM. Now, obviously, from a developer perspective, I realize it's a bit of a problem because all browsers support H.264, MP4. These guys don't. So today, the only way to do it is you have to encode the video in 2 different formats. You have to implement MP4 version for all browsers and a WebM version for the Chrome version, for the Chrome browsers. If Chrome is running on Windows, Microsoft has done something which will make Chrome will play H.264 MP4 video. But if Chrome is running on Mac or on Linux, you're out of luck. So that's one downside, because Chrome has decided not to support it. The other good thing is you can actually put multiple versions there. So you can say video, source equals MP4, then the MP4 version. You can also put next to that source equals OGV, which is the OGG Vorbis, or next to that you can say source equals WebM. It's up to the browser to pick which one it wants to render. They'll go sequentially. If you support MP4, go play MP4. You don't support it, go to the next version. If you support none of them, you can actually put a Flash object tag there, or a Silverlight object tag, and rely on Silverlight fallback. If that also is not supported, you can put a sorry message there, which is really, really cool, because you can take any video format, put it up there. That doesn't work, try this. That doesn't work, put a sorry message, which is nice. That'll definitely work. The sorry message always works. So let me show you a quick demo of this. So I'm just going to pull up Visual Studio and tell me if you guys can see this. So that's my video.html. Can you guys see this at the back? Now? But this is the time you say yes or you say no. No, okay. Now? Better, excellent. So nothing fancy here, doc type HTML, put the HTML, put the head, body, and so on. And right in the body I have video src equals MP4. Let me take some of these things off, right? For the purpose of the demo. Oops, not the whole thing. So I've got the video tag. I also have, so the next slide is on audio, so I'll show you audio as well. Let's go play this in the browser, save changes, yes. So that's the video and that's the audio. It's not playing because I haven't told it to play. So let's play the audio. Okay, looks like the audio is down in the control. Looks like audio is down, audio is not playing. Similarly in the video, I can basically go ahead and say play, and the video actually plays. This is when you should normally hear the audio, but it looks like there's an issue with the wire. Oh, there, okay. So the video is playing. And if I try to play audio, you'll realize both the audio and video are playing in parallel, right? Which is, okay, no big deal. You could do that with multiple Flash objects here, or Silverlight objects. The good thing is all this is zero code, right? Let me also show you something else. In the video control, you will realize there's no controls there. So let me go ahead and say controls. Let me also say I want this to autoplay. And now let's go and save this, reload, and you'll realize the controls actually show up on their own. Simple, right? Really, really simple, no lines of code. Let's go one better. Let's close this, and let's say on mouse over, this dot pause. You know what this is going to do, right? And on mouse out, it should be this dot play. So again, no rocket science. Save this, play this, pause, play, pause, play. Very simple, right? So you can actually tinker around with the video quite a bit. And this is, by the way, you should learn to love this video, because you'll see this video so many times in today's demo. Okay, so that's how the video tag works. And one of the other things that you can do with IE9 is you can actually emulate different browser modes. You can emulate IE8 mode, IE7 mode, and you'll actually see the sorry message in those cases. So that's how this works. One of the other big things which I'll talk about later in the day in my next talk is this fact that IE9 is entirely hardware accelerated. And what that basically means is all of the video playback, all of the graphics, text, animation, video, everything that you do is not happening on the CPU. Everything gets offloaded to the GPU, which obviously is an order of magnitude faster than the CPU for processing these things. So that's exactly what you saw. Similarly, this is the audio tag. I'm not going to walk through this. You have controls. You can do fancy stuff like, when a button is pressed, increase the volume of the video, of the audio, or decrease the volume of the audio. You can do all those things. Two prime formats, the Apple audio codec format and the MP3 format. That's what's recommended. Now let's get into something more fun, SVG. How many of you know SVG or have heard of SVG? What does it stand for? Scalable Vector Graphics. Good. So this is another one of the big bodies of spec inside HTML5. Now, for those of you who don't know SVG, let me give you a quick, 30-second pitch on SVG. SVG is basically pictures represented using XML markup. What that basically means is you can modify the DOM. You can actually walk through the SVG document object model, insert a line in the middle, right? And how would you do that? Walk the DOM, create element, put the line element there. The other good thing is because it's vector based, it's not a bitmap, it's not bits flipped into 0 and 1 or different colors. These particular drawings are fairly small, in size, because you can do a view source on the image, and they scale very, very well. They're vector-based graphics, which means instead of saying draw a red line from 1010 to 2020, you would actually describe, how the line is to be drawn and what color is to be used. So you're not switching bits to red or anything. So when you zoom these in, zoom these out, they scale brilliantly. That's one of the huge benefits of SVG. They're resizable without degradation. They're vector images composed of shapes instead of pixels. And of course, it's just XML, so you can compress with that. This is how you would draw that picture. You'll actually say, draw me a rectangle. So notice the SVG open and the SVG close tags right here. You will give the size of the full SVG element, inside which you will put a red filled rectangle and a blue filled rectangle. You will give it a width and a height. So it's fairly simple, straightforward, right? So I said, what if you take this and make this a little more interesting? Back to Visual Studio. So what I did is, I said, let me go create a flag, right? Let me again increase the size. A lot of these are numbers, but let me just walk you through quickly. So I've created a 600 width and a 450 height flag. Again, if you read the name of the flag, this is the Indian flag. And obviously I didn't want to get into jail, so I wanted to make really, really sure that the orders are correct. So as per the India Gov portal that is operational, the ratio is supposed to be 1.5. So 450 and 600 has to be the ratio. You can have it in different sizes. And then I created 3 rectangles with the same ratios being maintained. Put the right colors. The colors are the more important ones. That will get me into jail. And then, of course, there was the Ashok Chakra, which was really, really hard. The other thing which I wanted to talk to you about is the JavaScript engine in IE9 is called Chakra. So I said, this makes a good analogy. So let me go show you this. View in browser, yes. That's the tricolor. Nothing fancy. The good thing is you can actually do a view source on an image, right? So you see the whole image there. Is that neat or what? Of course, if you're trying to create copy protected images, SVG is probably not the good thing. But because this is SVG, notice how beautifully this scales. And obviously, SVG is also hardware accelerated in IE9, so it scales very, very fast. So I'm at 100% zoom. I'm just going to keep Control and plus pressed. I'm going to zoom in. No pixelation. There's no dithering. It keeps redrawing again and again and again and again, and it scales beautifully well. That's the Ashok Chakra, obviously in all its detail. And I can obviously zoom out, and it scales out beautifully as well. It's one of my favorite demos because it's Indian flag with SVG, right? So obviously all of the sources available. Feel free to flaunt the Indianness. I'm really proud of this. And again, no code, no Photoshop, no paintbrush, right? Because I'm sure that would have gotten me into jail. But this is how SVG works. So if you want to use SVG, by all means go ahead and do that. The other relatively perceived as a competing offer to do graphics in HTML5 is this thing called as the canvas tag. How many of you have heard of this? How many of you absolutely love it? Fewer. Okay. I absolutely love Canvas because what this allows you to do is it gives you a paint surface inside the browser, and the only way to populate it is JavaScript. Anybody who's been around since Win32 programming days, get device context, get DC, release DC, this is very, very similar to that. You get a device context to the surface, and then you just party. You can draw rectangles, you can draw lines, you can do whatever you want to do. And that's exactly how you would do it. Again, no rocket science. You can put a canvas tag, insert the obligatory sorry message if the browser doesn't support. But if it does support, you can do a get element by ID, get the context. You can actually see get context 2D. This is very, very important thing. People tend to omit the fact that the only canvas support in HTML5 today is 2-dimensional. You can't do 3D in HTML5. And if somebody says, hey, HTML5 is going to kill Flash and Silverlight, that's one answer why it can't, because these guys already do 3D. Silverlight support for 3D was just announced last week. Flash is also supporting 3D. So, that's one thing that you definitely can't do with HTML5. And again, if they decided to do it, HTML5 decides to support 3D, that's another 10 years. So don't even go there. So that's, simple example. Get the context, fill it with one color, fill it with another color. I said, let me go back and use our favorite wildlife video and show you some stuff. This one. So this is a very basic image copy video. Let me show you what this does first. That's the video, right? And I can say play video on canvas. So proof, that's the video, right? You can see the controls there. right? And I can do a play. I won't do that. I'll say play video on canvas. What's happening here is, I'm going to hit mute. For every frame of the video being rendered on the screen, there is code that I have written which goes pixel by pixel, of the entire image of the video, captures one frame, replicates that frame on the canvas below. So this element is actually a canvas. This is actually a canvas element. This is the video element. Let me play that again. So I basically rip the entire frame, put that on the canvas, and then do that for the next frame, and then the next frame, and then the next frame. So what you're seeing is the video being duplicated. And you can do some fancier things like you can flip the image upside down. You can show mirror reflection of the image, right? How many lines of code? I can show you that, not much. This is all there is. This is video editing inside the browser. Trust me, Canvas is extremely, extremely good at what it does. Of course, the better part is all of this is hardware accelerated. So if I do this again and show you Task Manager, nothing is going to happen. Let me show you Task Manager. I'll tell you that this machine that I'm using is a 3-year-old machine. It's not running an i5, it's not running an i7. It's an Intel Centrino V Pro, right? So it's a 3-year-old machine. So let me keep this always on top. And I'm going to say play video on canvas. Nothing. Absolutely nothing on the CPU. This is, and really, this is quite a bit of animation work, right? I'm going pixel by pixel. Literally, I take one pixel at a time, one row. It's a 320, 240 video, right? So 320 into 240 pixels, every frame, copy that and replicate it. And nothing is happening on the CPU because the GPU is really, really good for this. If you try this in another browser, the CPU will spike, obviously. And it may not even work properly. So that's Canvas. Do you guys think Canvas is good? Excellent, excellent. I'll show you some more cheap tricks that you can do with the Canvas later on. So one question obviously is where would you use SVG, where would you use Canvas? Because both of these are graphical representation options. SVG is a lot more useful when you have highly detailed diagrams, technical drawings and charts. Most of the floor plans for complex buildings are done with SVG because you can just zoom in, zoom out, you can do a lot of that. Canvas on the other hand is actually a bitmap. So if I go back to the, to the demo and play this on Canvas, and if I do a zoom in, you'll actually see all the dithering. You can see the dithering, right? The image is really pixelated. And this is the bottom picture. Obviously it happens in the video as well, right? But so the scaling is just much more gorgeous in SVG as compared to on the canvas. Also in SVG, the draw actually happens at runtime. You're actually defining the draw this line, draw this rectangle, copy that image, etc., etc. In Canvas, it's actually entirely up to you, right? The browser is not doing anything. You pick the handle, you pick the device context, and you draw things on it. So let's keep moving on. GPU acceleration, both of them are hardware accelerated. Performance, SVG is best used when you have a larger surface area and a smaller number of objects. It's the other way around for Canvas. If you have a smaller surface and a larger number of objects. Geolocation. One of the other things that's added in HTML5 is the ability for the website to detect where the user is. And you can do this in two ways. You can do a get location to find out where he is. You can even do something a little more sinister and say watch location, which means as soon as the location changes in latitude, longitude terms, let me know, or call this function, which is really, really neat. So I'm going to quickly go over and rely on my internet connection. This is a sample. I didn't write this one. This is the only one that I didn't write. I'm going to hit locate me. And what it does is, it happened a little too quickly, so let me refresh that again. I'm going to hit locate me. And the browser locates that I'm on C.V. Raman Road, and I'm very close to Institute of Wood Science and Technology, which is where we are. So the browser knows where you are viewing the page from. You could use it for, putting out location-relevant data, right? Find me Pizza Hut. Well, that's easily done here. You have to go, 100 meters north, turn left, that's Pizza Hut. So all of that is possible through geolocation. The good thing, same code works across multiple browsers. Chrome supports geolocation, Firefox 4 supports geolocation. So write one, run anywhere. That's actually possible with this sample. I'm sure some of you are worried about, hey, how does the browser know me? Well, it does IP reverse lookup, right? So browser actually doesn't know where you are. It just connects to the local proxy, pivot, telco, and looks up a reverse IP on the server. And that's kind of how you would use it. You basically get the location in latitude, longitude terms. You also get an accuracy, which will tell you in meters. Is it plus minus 350 meters, plus minus 500 meters, plus minus kilometer, right? That's also easily obtained through this. Now, the second biggest body of spec, CSS3. You guys with me so far? Hunger building up for curd rice or more CSS3, whichever it might be. So let's go on. CSS3 is magnificent in what it does, trust me. You have to take my word for it. It's the biggest spec, and essentially if CSS3 pans out the way it's playing out, and I'm sure it will, you will basically be removing the HTML spec only for content. What goes here, how it gets presented is entirely in CSS. Should it be in columns? Should it be this big? Should it be this big? Should it be having rounded borders, this, that? All presentation aspect, 100% of the presentation aspect moves to this, right? So you would not see font, bold, italics, nothing is in HTML, everything is moved to CSS3. And this is one of my favorite examples, this border radius, right? So this is implemented using the border radius tag in IE. Like I said, no vendor specific prefixes. If you want to work, work this across browsers, that's possible too. It's a standard. Nobody else is, doing a vendor specific prefix on this particular spec. So today, if you want to put out a box with rounded borders, how would you do this if you didn't have CSS3? Pictures, right? You would use images. So suddenly this graphics designer in your company who's very, very popular and does a lot of stuff, thank you. We love you, but I can do this myself. The good thing is, as you can see in the image, you can give 4 different radii. So this side should be a little more flatter, this should be a little more squarer, this side should be really rounded. All of that is possible. And then, should it be a double border, should it be a dotted border, a dashed border, it's an inset border, outside border, all of those things are possible. I won't bore you with a demo for this. I have a single demo which consolidates all these things. The next one is colors. So colors, no big deal. We've always supported RGB colors. CSS has always supported RGB colors. There's a new A at the end of it. Anybody wants to guess? Alpha channel, so transparency, right? So you can do an RGB-A or you can do an HSL-A. RGB, red, green, blue, all of us know this. HSL is hue, saturation, lightness, which is another way to describe colors. And the alpha channel in both of them indicates how transparent should it be. Now those are very nice pastel colors, right? And it's easily obtained, it's easily possible to do that with, with the transparency element. Again, I'm not going to do a demo, I'm just going to keep moving on. This is another popular one, shadows, right? Again, graphics designer, we love you, you have to do some other things now. Because now with CSS drop shadows, you can choose not just the shadow, you can choose the color of the shadow, you can even put multiple shadows. Now what multiple shadows allow you to do is, if you look at me, you'll probably see, well, one shadow, but if you have multiple light sources, you know how this works, right? If the image is here, the light source is here, the shadow is going to be here, right? Similarly, if there's a light source here, the shadow will be here. You can actually put out 4 shadows for every object. In this one example, you can see for the first one, I've got 1 drop shadow, which means the light source is on the left top. For the second one, I've put 2 of them. So there is 1 light source on the left top, 1 light source at the right bottom, which puts out 2 different shadows. Obviously, I'm not a graphics designer, that's why the color combination is so lousy. But you get the idea. You can actually put shadows, and you can even say how long the shadow should be, right? Which means how close the light source is, or how far the light source is. And frankly, you can do some really gorgeous things with this. Clearly, this is just a demo. So let me show you a shadow example. I can't say I'll show you a shady example, so let me show you a shadow example. Or actually, let me do one better. Because we're running out of time, let me just move to the next one and I'll show you all of them. Backgrounds is another one. You can actually have multiple backgrounds per item. So in this case, I actually have 3 different images stacked one on top of the other, like a nicely carousel kind of a manner. The code is fairly simple. The first image goes right at the back, and then I've given it a 90-90 position, and then 60-60 and 30-30, so you see a nice cascade. And actually, let me show you a single. This is called a weather widget. Let me do a few in browser. That's the view in browser. So nice Bangalore weather. I've got rounded shadows, rounded borders. I've got multiple background images. This one, this Bangalore, Karnataka, this is all text. All this is text. This Bangalore, Karnataka is in a darker box, which is on top, and you can see there's a slight amount of translucency there. You can see the fact. And there's also some nifty stuff. There's a video in there, which is actually a live video, and it's got commentary and stuff like that, which tells you how the weather is, right? So again, very nifty stuff done with very little CSS, nothing else. The next one is WOF, Web Open Font Format. Today, if you want to put a web page which has the font that you love, You're basically dependent on the user having the font on their machine. There's no way for you to package the font that you like and put it on the web page, right? So let me show you a quick example that will get the point across. So I've got two fonts called Musclehead and Whimsy. So to show you, there's no way these fonts are on my machine, right? There's no way these fonts are on your machine. What WAF allows you to do is package them. So quickly go back into code. I actually have the WAF files here. I actually have whimsy.waf and musclehead.waf. I can just zoom in. So I actually have these two WAF files that I've downloaded and kept on my machine. And all I'm doing is I'm creating a font face attribute in CSS, giving the source and the URL to the WAF files. You can actually take any font that you have licenses for, let's say a TrueType font, or you create a font, you can actually package it in a WAF and give it around to people. There's no way to go back from WAF to the actual original font format. So your licenses, hard work, everything is protected. But this is a very, very nice way to use the fonts that you like and put them on the web page and still not download them and install them for the user to use them in Word or Outlook. He can't do that, right? It's all limited within the browser context. So again, you can get the design of your choice with WAF. The next one, media queries. Most of you attended this, so I'm not going to walk you through a lot of detail. The idea is you can have different CSS design depending on the size of the media on which the document is going to be shown. You can go by screen size as here, or you can go by screen versus print. Right? You can do that as well. For printer, use a different one. I'm not going to walk through a lot of this, but I'll show you a fairly nifty demo. And this is media queries in browser. So what this demo does is it essentially uses a background image. I just told you CSS can have background images, right? So I have a background image that shows a thumb, and then as I increase the size, the background images change. So it's quietly, it's a simple nifty demo, right? You can toy around with the CSS that gets applied based on the size of the window, right? So this is for mobile, this is for netbook, this is for a high definition, laptop monitor. So nifty demo gets the point across. And no code, right? Absolutely no code. All I have is, if the media has a minimum width of 700 pixels, show the 5. If it's between 600 and 700, show 4, and 3, and 2, and 1. And all of this is applied to box, and dot box refers to div class box. No code. Very nifty, very compelling, gets the point across. So if you want to build a single write once, run anywhere application, keep HTML just to the text, just to the stuff that you want to show, what gets shown, how it gets shown, move all of that over to media queries. And again, very, very powerful stuff. I have a few more minutes, so I'm just going to move along. CSS selectors, how many of you have heard of this? One. So CSS selectors is probably, make that 4, probably one of my most favorite features, because what it allows you to do is pick and choose elements and then apply styles to them. So again, let me show you the code instead of walking you through more PowerPoint. CSS selectors. So what this one does, let me show you the document first. So I've got a p tag, I've got a div tag, I've got a couple of inputs, I've got 2 a tags, hyperlink tags, and I've got 2 images, right? Now, based on what is written here, whatever English is written here, markup is written here, you can apply different styles. So I'll show you one, which is applying different styles to the 2 images based on what the alt tag says, right? So if the alt tag has the in it, if it contains the, round the borders. So there are 2 images, the same image, right? Based on this, the style will change. So let's view in browser. I don't know why the focus doesn't shift. So the first flower has rounded images, rounded borders. The second one doesn't. No code. Apply using CSS selectors. Similarly, notice the 2 W3Cs. One has blue color, one has green color. Let me just zoom in to make it easier. One is blue, one is green. And that is actually changed based on what the href says, w3c.org and w3c.com. So for all elements, A elements, which have an href, which contain com, color should be green. So the power of applying different CSS styles based on the content of the document is this. So what we just saw with media queries is where is it shown? If on screen, if on netbook, if on phone. Here we are saying if you're showing this, do this. If you're showing that, do that. So based on content selection. Again, very, very powerful. CSS 2D transforms. So this one is So there are two things that I have to call out. One is you can flip rotate images with this. You can change content the way it's shown. What's more important is the -ms tag, which is in red, because this is a vendor-specific prefix. It's not an HTML standard yet. We support it, but it's not a standard yet, and that's why there is a vendor-specific prefix to this. So a simple example again for this is I can do, one sec, video transformed. So again, our friendly bear video, view in browser. I don't know why the browser is not switching. So on mouse over, on mouse out. I'm just flipping the video upside down. This does not use any canvas though. There's no canvas here, right? This is just applying a CSS style and taking it off. So you can see it's a 180-degree flip on the other side. So far with me? So like I said, it's a whirlwind tour, so you're seeing a lot of things that are just scratching the surface of what HTML5 makes possible. So now, last demo, and I want to make sure this is nice and interesting. So close all of these. So I said, what if we take the video edits one step further? Let me show you this, and then we will do the talking. So I have the same friendly bear. I've got a bunch of buttons at the bottom. I'm basically going to say play video, right? What it does is, this is a canvas. I've written IE6. Now you might wonder why I have written IE6. Come to that in a moment. But what I've done is I've taken every one of the frames and I've filled the text with a video. So you will see it's not just one video. There are lots of videos that are playing here. Video with small versions, right? Again, this is handwritten code. It's 40 lines of JavaScript. Try doing that in any language, any development tool of your choice. Visual Studio, C#, Java, Flex, have it. You can't do it in lesser lines of code, to be very honest. And it's going to be extremely difficult to do this. Looks good? I say, okay, let's take it one step further. What if I were to remove all the reds from, let's remove all the greens from the video, right? So take off all the greens. So obviously you have a video which has got reds and blues, so it's got a funny color. I said, let's do black and white. So let's go to black and white mode. So the video, again, I'm going to zoom in to make sure you see this. The video is completely black and white. So again, go frame by frame, take every pixel. If you want to remove reds, go pixel by pixel. Of the RGB, take the R to 0, right? You want to remove the greens, set the G to 0. Go pixel by pixel and do this for a 320 to 40 video, right? What's the CPU usage? Negligible. It's not choking my CPU, it's not killing anything. If I do this in Chrome, it goes off to 100% because they're not hardware accelerated, ditto for Firefox. But that's not the point. Let's come back to the demo. So that's how you do video editing. Now you might be wondering, why IE6? Obviously I want to see IE6 dead. Microsoft wants to see IE6 dead. India unfortunately still has 12.6% IE6. I don't know why. So all of you, if you have IE6, please help us kill IE6. We actually have a piece of code that you can put in your website which actually tells the user, hey, you are using an old browser, please go to a new website. We have this code. If you want it, just drop me a note or catch me on Twitter. I'll make sure you get the code. We even have a website called IE6 Countdown. We're very, very serious about this. It's a 10-year-old product, frankly, so I don't see a reason why anybody should be using this. So now to the killer part. So why IE6? I said, well, if you take IE6 and you flip it over, what do you get? Well, you get IE9, which is nifty. What happens in this demo, of course, is even the bear gets flipped. So you have a video which is now in black and white, playing upside down in 9, but playing straight in IE6, all with 40 lines of JavaScript. Trust me, HTML5 is very, very, very powerful, and it's here. You can use this very reliably in a browser like IE9, and most of this stuff even works in other browsers. I can show you this in Chrome. I can show you this in Firefox. It's going to be a lot more sluggish because those browsers are not hardware accelerated, and they are not, they try to be cross-platform, so they're not good on any platform, basically. They're not optimized to run as well on Windows as IE is. So that's IE9, video playing upside down, 40 lines of JavaScript. I'm out of time, but I'm still going to continue because I'm running into lunch, and I have to continue on my promise. So what we saw audio, we saw video, we saw SVG, we saw a little bit of canvas, we saw a little bit of geolocation, we saw a little bit of CSS. What we did not see is all of the rest. Really. That's how big this is. I can keep going on for days and still not scratch the surface. I haven't told you everything about Canvas either. I haven't told you everything about SVG either, but I'm just trying to put tick marks. That's how big the body of spec is. But yes, the reality is, the product is here, the spec is here, and it's actually very, very close. W3C actually sent out an announcement that in May 2011, which is next month, HTML5 is going to get to recommendation. What that means is the first spec that we saw, which has all the markup, that is going to get to candidate recommendation in May 2011, but it's going to be a standard in 2014. So, which is good, which is very, very good, because their initial dates were 2022. Just so you know. So they've advanced it by 8 years, which is excellent. So the reality is, it's here. Make sure you start playing around with HTML5. It's fantastic, just the stuff that you can do. And it's here and it's real. We believe IE9 is an extraordinarily capable browser. There are lots of scenarios that are made possible with IE9 that cannot be done in other browsers. I'll talk to you more about that in the next session. We even have a bunch of demos which are available on a website called IE Test Drive. Demo after demo showcasing all the HTML5 stuff that IE9 supports. Again, I'll show you more of this in the next session. I know I haven't been taking questions. I'd love to take all your questions right now, or continue to catch me offline. But question time. Do you guys like the session? Was this useful? You are all HTML5 experts now? Yes, excellent, good. I'm proud of you. Questions? Question?
I believe we support no geolocation. Do you require any permissions for tracking?
That is correct. Because the browser had already run the demo once, it didn't ask you for permission. But if I close the browser and start, it will say, do you want to give permission or not?
Right.
Yeah, that's a safe thing.
And I have a few more.
Yes, please.
Like we are showing the video toolbar for play buttons. Can we customize those toolbars?
Well, what you can do is, instead of showing, I use the controls attribute, right? Don't use the control attribute. You can put your own div tag with whatever and then wire them up. So you can do a video.play, video.pause, one line of code, you can do all that. So that's how you would customize it.
Thank you.
Somebody had a question here? Yes. Where's the? Oh, that's a big, okay, good question. Where's the map coming from? So that's actually a Bing map. So the demo, what it does is, once you find out the location, you just get lat long. You get lat long and accuracy. After that, to show it on a map is additional code, which is why the demo is done, which is why I didn't write the demo. That's the only demo I didn't write, because then I would have to get access to Bing map and then lay it over and so on and so forth. But what you get in your application is latitude and longitude. And then you have to figure out whether that latitude, longitude is Bangalore in Karnataka or Chennai in Tamil Nadu. You'll have to figure that out. Any other questions?
Will there be a stage
Yes, ma'am.
where, there are at least the minimum set of things have to be, supported by the different organizations which they say they support HTML5?
Yeah, actually, it's a very, very good question. Very, very good question. The question is really, is there a minimum that all of them support? So what we've done is we have, on the IE Test Drive site, we've put out something called as an IE Testing Center. And what we've done is we've taken various versions. So, okay, let me take a step back. The fact that a standard exists and support for the standard is verifiable is a big issue. Till date, you will not believe this. We've been doing all this HTML stuff, but till this version of HTML5, there has not been a verifiable test for implementation of standard. Would you believe it? It's like saying, hey, I am a Formula 1 driver. How do you prove it? I am a Formula 1 driver. There has not been a conformance test till date. The good thing is W3C realizes this. And actually, Microsoft sort of seeded the idea that tests have to be verifiable. So we've submitted a bunch of tests, but thankfully enough, all the other guys have come together. Google has submitted a bunch of tests. Mozilla has submitted a bunch of tests. And this is results for the tests. Again, I'm not trying to tom-tom about how standard supportive we are. I'll do that in the next session. But in this session, we've obviously implemented a lot of these standards. And you can see, we also have IE8 on the right somewhere. Actually, we removed IE8. It used to be the column that is reddest, but on all of them. But this is just 5,790 tests on JavaScript. With IE9, we supported 95%. I misquoted that as 99% earlier. Sorry about that. But with IE10, we support 100%. You look at the others; they're all in different versions, different levels of support. So this is. Sorry. W3C is actually doing it. So exactly. So I forgot the URL, but in W3C website there is a section where every vendor, Microsoft, Google, and so on, has to submit test results. They've done this for CSS. They've now started to do this for HTML5. Also, you will see the number of tests are quite small, right? I mean, this is like only 204 tests for CSS3. You're kidding me. CSS3 is like so massive. There are 204 tests. So obviously the number of tests has to go up, right? Test coverage has to go up. Once that goes up, then all the other numbers on the right side, they will all start to look good. So that's the basic challenge. But excellent question, thank you.
WCC has not provided a kind of, how many tests or anything?
No. So they are not the authority, right? W3C is, you and I can go and join W3C and we can submit tests. So it's very, community driven. So if you want to go write tests, you can write tests and submit them, and IE and Chrome and everybody has to validate against the test. So W3C is not the authority, so to say, they're a governing body. So, question?
You might have...
That is correct. Yes. Okay, good question. So trust me, it was a very hard choice, right? So let me answer the question in a slightly different, let me rephrase the question in a slightly different way. IE9 only runs on Windows 7 and Vista, doesn't run on XP, right? Multiple reasons for that. I'll give you two. One is Windows XP doesn't have the kind of graphics capability nor the security model that is required for IE9. That's number one. Number two, XP is an unsupported product. It's 10 years old. I often like to ask around, how many of you here have Windows XP? Few of you, respectable few. Of the same people, how many of you have 10-year-old laptops? Or 10-year-old phones? Or 10-year-old cameras? That's the point. It is a very old product and it was good for its time, right? It was very good for its time, but the world has moved. The web has moved. I have another slide deck which I won't use today, which compares how Microsoft.com looked in 2001 when XP and IE6 came out, how it looks now. We've done this comparison for every website. There's a very neat website called web.archive.org, which has copies of how India Times looked 10 years ago and Netscape looked 10 years ago. And frankly, 10 years ago, Mozilla was some guy's blog. It wasn't even Firefox. But coincidentally, Google.com looked exactly the same way 10 years ago. The homepage has not changed at all. So the world has moved quite a bit, and we're trying to build a product for the future of where the web will go. Again, I'm not advertising my next session, but you should really come to that to hear about what our view for HTML5 is. And this is not just a fancy, nice and dandy, oh, we also support HTML5. We're serious about this. And again, as a Microsoft person, I can say this with a fair amount of pride, we support HTML5 really, really well. And we're not doing this for a tick mark thing. Oh, yeah, let's also support it. No, and you'll hear a lot about this. So that's the reason we didn't want to build something for Windows XP. XP also is unsupported, by the way. So I know, long answer, but decided not to do with it. So people have to move to newer versions of Windows XP, Windows Vista or Windows 7. And in many geographies, unfortunately not India, XP install base is lesser than Win7 install base in many geographies, but not in India yet. I also, don't quote me for this, but if you're going to get Windows XP, you probably want to pirate it. See if you can get the newer one. So that's kind of the view. But good question. Comes up all the time. Any other questions?
One more.
Somebody had a mic. Yes.
So you might have answered this, but so when the devices say, like the iPhones, the iPads, and the Android devices say when they support that they support HTML5.
Yes.
Do they mean the same HTML5 that you showed, or is it a subset, or what is it?
Very, very good question. So I know Apple does a lot of work to ensure that Safari version on the Mac and Safari version on the iOS are supporting the same standards. Unfortunately, I'm not as well versed to say if Google does the same with Chrome. So that's one problem. Second problem is, if you look at Windows Phone today, we don't support IE9. But the next update of Windows Phone 7 called Mango, that is going to support IE9 as is. So everything that IE9 supports is going to be on the phone as well. And that's going to be hardware accelerated too. So last week we showed a preview at an event called Mix. We showed a preview of IE9 running on the phone. And because that's hardware accelerated, the same demos run much faster on a Windows Phone 7 compared to an Android or an iPhone. So we've done a bunch of work around that as well. Because all of these new devices, they also have a GPU, so they can get really hardware accelerated. So the performance experience is just gorgeous. In case you haven't seen Fish Tank, I'll show you Fish Tank in a moment, but we can continue the discussions. Next question. You'll be amazed to believe the fact that this is not a web page. This is a web page. You can actually do a view source. I can go full screen, and some of you might remember a screensaver that was available. And this is 60 frames a second. This is not, like when we used to be children, we used to play these books, right? You can just do a flip and how you can see Kapil Dev bowling and all that. That's 24 frames per second to the human eye is motion. This is 60 frames. And this is with 20 fish. I can keep going. So let me do, where's my mouse? I can do 50 fish, good motion, 100 fish, 250 fish, 500 fish, 1,000 fish. Now you drop to 27 frames per second. Good demo, right? So let me show you the same thing in Chrome. Close IE, close all tabs. Show the same thing in Chrome. This is again HTML. The brilliant part is the code works. It's actually write once, run anywhere, almost, but it actually works in Chrome as well. It works in Firefox as well. And by the way, I really, really appreciate you guys, spending 10 minutes over into the session. I hope this is a good use of your time. Internet connection is a little slow, so while the page, oh, there it is. So with 20 fish, you're not getting 60 frames per second in Chrome. And this is the latest build of Chrome, by the way. This is 11 point blah. So let's do 50 fish. Gets better, gets better, gets better, gets really good. 100 fish. 250 fish. Dead fish. You know how you tell a fish is dead? It's in water, but it's not moving, right? Again, what's essentially happening is CPU usage, right? You would see Chrome, relying a lot more on the CPU because they're not optimized to use the power of the full PC. In fact, in most of the browsers, if you have multiple cores, the browser just runs on the first core. And I don't know, any of you bought a new machine which has one core? You can't buy machines that have one core. All the machines today have 2 cores or more, but the browser will only run on the first. Why? I don't know, it's not scaling out. It might sound silly that, we are talking about browser scalability, which is usually a database or a backend web server scalability conversation. We are talking about browser scalability, but it's important. The kind of computing power that's available on the PCs, it's not funny. Even on the phone, it's not funny. We have like the black book, the playbook. That's a dual core tablet, So if you have a browser on that device, which is not using 2 processors or 2 cores, what's the big idea? So that's what happens. You build for multiple platforms, you're not good on any. Again, sneak preview, we call this native HTML5. HTML5 that runs as good as native code. And that's a very big statement to make for any of you who've written native code. That's how good we are getting. So we can do video edits in the browser because it's native. It runs as well inside your browser as it runs on a native app. Again, you should try doing some of these things that I've done with 30 lines of JavaScript, 20 lines of JavaScript. Try doing that in managed code. You will not get performance. You will have to work really hard to get to that level of performance. But again, that's just demo stuff. So I hope this was useful. If you have more questions, I'm happy to continue. But otherwise, I think you should probably get lunch because the next session is starting at, I don't know, 1:50 or so, I think. 1?